everyone, good evening. The International Monetary Fund has lauded India's direct benefit transfer as a logistical marvel, a scheme which has reached hundreds of millions of people, specifically benefiting the women and the farmers of India. The World Bank Group, in fact, urged nations to adopt India's targeted cash transfer approach, saying that India managed to provide food or cash support to a remarkable 85% of rural households and 69% of urban households. Digital innovation aside, over the last 11 years, the Modi government has overseen a significant transformation of India's economic landscape, combining infrastructure expansion and fiscal discipline. Landmark reforms like the GST, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code are seen as measures which have modernized the economic framework and improved transparency and efficiency. So what has been the key highlights and what are the challenges going ahead? Over the next 30 minutes, I will decode that. Joining me first on the show is Sanjeev Sanyal, economist and a member of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Economic Advisory Council. Mr. Sanyal, really appreciate your time. India has emerged as one of the fastest growing major economies, but there are global uncertainties from supply chain realignments to geopolitical tensions. This is certainly testing India's resilience. So, according to you, how should India strategically position itself to both shield its economy and also at the same time seize new opportunities in this shifting global order?
So let me say that as our ranking goes up, now we are the fourth largest economy in the world. In around 18 to 24 months, we'll be the third largest economy in the world, going past Germany. In relative terms, if you're talking about us being the world's fastest growing major economy, there it doesn't matter because you see these global uncertainties affect everybody. If we are growing a little bit slower than we would have otherwise, so is everybody else. Where it matters is in terms of the absolute level of growth. So rather than growing at somewhere in the 6.5% range, we would much rather be growing at 7.5%, maybe even higher. That is difficult to do when your export market is this uncertain and various global supply chains are breaking down. So under those circumstances, we have to be a lot more constrained from our macroeconomic policy mix. We have to be much more careful about what we do with our current account, inflation, and so on. And also we have to be very, very careful about what happens to global capital flows. So yes, you're right, we have to be careful. But at the same time, if you're looking at a slightly longer horizon, it does come up with certain opportunities. For example, the liquefaction of global supply chains means that we can insert ourselves into it. So if you look at all the free trade agreements that we are now pushing for, we have obviously done quite a few in the recent past with Australia or UAE, and then more recently, UK. We are now pushing for something with the European Union and the United States. So no matter what cards are being played to us, we will have to sort of play those cards as they come. And so, we would have loved for this to be a very benign external environment, but that is not what is the case. So we will have to do as best as we can under the circumstances.
That's right. Mr. Sanyal, only recently India signed a significant FTA, which was, of course, done a day before Operation Sindoor. And that particular bilateral understanding actually marked a significant milestone between India and UK. It was seen as a comprehensive deal and it concluded after 3 years of negotiations. It will be seen as a big shift between India and UK. Do you think these are signs of India identifying newer markets, understanding fully well that there is a completely different challenge coming from US and an administration which cannot be trusted in long-term business relations?
I wouldn't interpret the uncertainty caused by recent US actions in quite that way. To be fair to the US, they have not disrupted us quite as much as comments from President Trump may suggest. So 2/3 of our exports to the US come from services which have not been affected. Of the 1/3 that is goods, if you look at pharmaceuticals or some of the other products, they're also not affected. Even the comments on mobile phones and so on, so far, actually hard tariffs have not been placed on them. That doesn't mean that the world has not been disrupted, but it has. And that disruption would have happened whether or not President Trump had won or not, because the old system simply was not working for many people, including India. And so, in some ways, this is something that we should have expected and anticipated. So, in that context, let me say, with the global multilateral trading system of the WTO under stress, our attempt is to take advantage of the new situation that has come. So, yes, we have signed one with the UK, but that is only one step. We are, in fact, pursuing aggressively free trade agreements with the European Union and, very importantly, with the United States itself. So I think, in that context, let me say that we will end up with global supply chains changed, and India intends to fully exploit whatever opportunities come out of this.
Okay. In the last 11 years, Mr. Sanyal, the Modi government has implemented several ambitious reforms. Yet there are concerns around execution at the state level and also private sector participation. So I want to understand from you, how can India really bridge the policy to execution gap to ensure inclusive growth in the coming decade?
So I think there's a whole bunch of things we have done. In fact, if you ask me the big changes that have happened over the last decade, they would include the following. One is the management of the Indian economy through the COVID crisis, which I think was very different from other countries, but turned out to be much better than most Western countries, but also what people thought we would be able to do. We have recovered from it quite strongly, as you know. We introduced the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which created for the first time a system of creative destruction, and it helped clean up the banks. The GST system, which, for the first time we ended up with a unified market in India. Then there is the inflation targeting framework, which has clearly brought down average inflation in India by at least 300, 400 basis points. Now, in each one of these cases, can one improve upon them? Yes, we can. The GST will remain a work in progress, and we can keep making it more efficient. As my late colleague Vivek Debroy would argue, we need to simplify the rates from the multiple rates and reduce the numbers of them. And I agree with that. Similarly, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, we have had certain disruptions caused by a recent Supreme Court judgment. I think we need to smoothen things out, make it work much better, and give certain amount of certainty in the framework of insolvency, absolutely critical for the creative destruction needed for a risk-taking economy, and so on and so forth. So each one of these things will remain work in progress. It's not like you do a bunch of reforms and then you go home. And I'm a big proponent of something called process reforms, which is the myriad small reforms that are needed in order to make our economy more efficient, improve ease of doing business, ease of doing living, whether it's in our, the ease of being able to withdraw EPF money or, get hold of our shares from the investors' education and protection fund, and so on and so forth. All of these are small reforms in their own space, but we literally need to do thousands of them. And so this is something that we have to push. And, if it requires us sometimes to, cause disruption, so be it.
Okay. Before I let you go, my last question, and this comes from the coinage that you just did of process reforms. Which, according to you, in the last 11 years has been that singular biggest achievement of this government in terms of process reforms?
So first of all, the whole point about process reforms is that none of them are singular big achievements. They're all small to medium reforms, but there are large numbers of them. Whether it's smoothening the way the patent system functions, or, for example, simplifying rules for drones from 77 permissions that drone flying required down to 7, or opening up the geospatial mapping sector. All of these are process reforms. Now, outside of those small sectors, nobody knows about them. When you remove OSP regulations, from the telecom ministry that helps the BPO IT-enabled services. Nobody else may even care about it, but it radically changes the game for that sector or that activity. And so I have been a advocate that while we do need to do structural reforms from time to time, and things like GST or IBC or inflation targeting are necessary, a very large part of the weight of what needs to be done are actually these process reforms. And there are literally thousands of them that need to be done. For the most part, there is no ideological debate or political debate about them. Somebody needs to just get up there, do the hard work of digging them out, make the change, see if the change had the required impact or it had some unwanted, unintended consequence, and just keep at it. It is hard work. And of course, as you know, a deregulation commission has been promised in the budget this year, so we should expect to have something in those lines in the next few weeks. So in that way, the idea is that this is a continuous process. You have to hammer away at it. This is not about doing one big structural reform and getting cheered on for it.
Yes. It's about reforms and continuity. Thank you so much, Sanjeev Sanyal. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining us on this special show. And joining me now is Dr. Sajid Chenoy, Managing Director and Chief Economist at JP Morgan. He is also the part-time member of the Economic Advisory Council of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Dr. Chenoy, appreciate your time. According to you, in these 11 years of Mr. Modi's government, what do you think has been the big bang economic idea or economic advancements, according to you, which has been really defining?
Well, there have been several areas that I think there's been a big focus on. I think the first thing which doesn't get enough appreciation because the focus is very much on growth is just the institutionalization of macroeconomic stability. I think one has to remember that in 2013 we had the taper tantrum. India was a member of the Fragile Five. Some stability, because I think macro stability is the bedrock on which growth will prosper over long periods of time. Now, what does that entail? I think there was an inflation targeting expectations, which then has an impact on how on the currency. I think there has been for many years now, for perhaps since 2000, and the government's very this is done is allow India to actually buy some monetary policy independence. We're at a time where the global environment is extremely volatile. This macro stability allows India's central bank to deviate and retain some independence. And so if you look at Indian interest rates compared to US interest rates now, so I know for others will talk about various other areas that have been impacted. I would argue, cleaning up balance sheets, the bankruptcy law, is just getting on, and I think will have effects going forward. So there are many different areas that the government has focused on, but I think we should also not.
Mr. Subramaniam recently declared that India had overtaken Japan to become the fourth largest economy in the world. Of course, his claim was based on data which came from the International Monetary Fund. But this claim has led to fairly divergent reactions. Which side of the debate are you standing on?
The inevitability that India will cross Japan, sometime this year or in the near future. I think just given the difference in growth rates, that's going to happen. For me, the question now, what are the implications of that? And I think the first thing that points to growth rate in dollar terms has grown at 9.5% on average for the last 25 years. Now, that's what we should be taking comfort from, that for 2.5 decades, grow at those rates, you're doubling your level of output every 7.5 years, right? And so essentially, we've seen 3 doublings that it's really the process that led to this that needs to be focused on. 2 points I'll make. Why does the size of nominal GDP matter, which is 4 trillion? Deciding which markets to set up in. We're in a very turbulent global environment where there is a recalibration of supply chains happening around the world. And the fact that having said that, we should also be cognizant that, from a quality of life perspective, what matters is per capita income. India is still below $3,000 per capita. High income status. And so there needs to be this relentless quest for growth and a relentless quest for reforms. I think once that happens,
one view and one achievement of this government, Dr. Chinoy, has of course been about improving the ease of doing business. In fact, if we were to climbed, places, India climbed 6 places on the World Bank's Logistic Performance Index 2023, now ranked. Are questions being raised, particularly with regards to foreign direct investment? Where are we not getting the picture right?
This is very much a we've got ways to go. Why is ease of doing business so important at this particular? The current trade war is creating for India. We're in a situation where, notwithstanding what Mr. Trump's reciprocal tariffs, now the Trump administration will inevitably appeal that. Are now going to be structurally competing economically. It's going to accentuate this China plus one desire on the part of firms. What's different about this trade war and the last trade war is last time a lot of that FDI to Thailand, to Indonesia, to Malaysia. This time what's happened is that the Trump administration is equally focused on Southeast Asia because they recognize that to the US market through third countries in Asia through what's called transshipment. And it's those transshipment fears that is going to make it hard for some of these Southeast Asian economies to be in a situation in the coming months that these tariffs both in China and Southeast Asia may remain quite sticky and elevated. This is that India try and conclude a trade deal with the US as soon as possible, remove that uncertainty. Because if you do, then when you talk about China to push FDI towards India in this trade war are very powerful and compelling. We need to complement that with more pull factors and more sustained reform. So I think first and foremost, we need, because we're now in a world with lots of trade frictions, we need to give access to third markets. Now, India has done very well to strike a trade deal with the UK. Hopefully, we can conclude a trade deal with the US, and hopefully large blocks. Then multinational companies know if you come and set up in India, you get relatively frictionless access to these markets, number one. I think in addition to that, tariffs, I think it's important that we continue down that path. If we want to better integrate into global value chains, then we have to recognize that there's so much, tantamount to an export tax. It's the oldest theorem in economics, the Lerner symmetry theorem. So we need to make sure that we reduce those import taxes. So the challenge is going to be, how do we rationalize delicate balance? And thirdly, I think, the process reforms, the ease of doing business reforms. In particular, I think that, labor codes, the government implement that will be important, because many of the opportunities that come up from Southeast Asia may well be in the labor intensive sectors. I think India's biggest focus, how do we rationalize or reduce the high capital labor ratio that's developed around the world in the last decade? So I think, promoting those labor market reforms in labor intensive sectors that emanate from Vietnam or from Southeast Asia or from China itself.
All right, Dr. Sajid Chinoy, pleasure speaking to you here on. And let me go straight to Raleigh in North Carolina. That's where William Bader is joining us. He is independent economic advisor and former professor of economics and chief. As someone who watches India and Indian milestones, what do you think has been the big milestone in the domain of economics?
The most recent impressive achievement was the fact that India is now the fourth largest economy. By size. Now, we must be somewhat careful because this is, of course, not the same as GDP per capita, per head of population. In position 136. So there's a whole lot of stuff to be done. Incidentally, if you look at GDP, but correct for the fact that non-traded goods are much cheaper in lower income. GDP in what we call purchasing power parity units, PPP units, that India is already in third position. China, regular GDP, not correcting for the differences in non-traded goods prices, then the US is still far number one at 13.5 trillion. And as I said, India very impressively in fourth position. And I think it will have some distant future. So this is a very impressive achievement.
Yes, absolutely. We have been speaking to several experts, and they have certainly what the announcement came from the chief economic advisor. But Mr. Bader, let me give you some numbers in terms of the ground benefit transfer, which has benefited the women, the ease of doing business in make for a great India story for the world outside to invest in India?
Is, in my view, going to be the high growth it has, of course, the demographics. It has taken the measures to enhance tax regime that is taking the steps also to educate the population right on the way to become the growth.
If India is the country of interest, India has achieved, and of course, the infrastructure push which we have seen, particularly in the last 10 years, which has been driving the economy in many ways, it's moving away from. What do you think will be the big challenge going ahead in the coming few months and years?
Well, there still remains there's a lot that remains to be done. The main challenge, I think, is to ensure that higher levels of education are achieved by a larger part of the population, and especially the female population. Education, training, making people ready for the AI revolution.
Yes.
And India can do that, but it will require continued effort and continued public spending also. And also, doing something about possible social barriers to greater integration of females in the top of the labor force.
All right, William Better, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. William Better, really appreciate your time. Viewers, you heard all three experts and they had some great things to say about the Indian economy, the path it has taken, and what are the challenges going ahead in terms of reaching the big target for Viksit Bharat 2047. We are putting out this entire discussion on ndtv.com. That's all from me. Thanks so much for watching.
The last 1 month, if you see, the share prices of Genzol Engineering has fallen more than 58%.
Why are the rating firms calling the debt payments as default?
We have two credible credit rating agencies on March 4th coming and downgrading the stock to D.
Statements are consistently being proven wrong,
Right.
And transactions are being taken place which are different from what they were originally pictured to be.
The company claimed it would roll out 6,400 electric vehicles. But what it has rolled out is a shocking scam. Funds meant for the project were funneled allegedly back to the promoters, the Jaggi brothers. What did the money buy? Not EVs, of course, but a lavish flat in Gurgaon's luxurious DLF Carmelias.
Namaskar, India. India's Gaganyatri ready to go to space.
As Indian astronaut preps for launch, countdown to Indian history in space. A nation waits with breath.
Very good evening and welcome to NDTV. It's time for Nationwide at 6 on the broadcast. I am Ankit Tyagi. An action-packed full hour lined up for you. We'll start, ladies and gentlemen, with one of the most audacious attacks that Ukraine has conducted deep inside Russia. The Operation Spiderweb, which many are comparing as the Pearl Harbor moment for Russia. I mean, drones of a few $1,000s destroying strategic Air Force hardware of billions of dollars in Russia, deep inside Russia. That is going to be our top focus, the impact of this on the peace talks. We'll then, of course, shift our focus at 6:15 to the Sindoor politics city, burning up the runway as the election, in fact, you're getting ready into the election season for West Bengal. Amit Shah versus Mamata Banerjee. Is Operation Sindoor being politically weaponized? That is going to be our question. Then at 6:30, we'll take you and show you some pictures of flood devastation in northeast. The entire northeast region is suffering because of flash floods and the massive flooding, the rainfall which is taking. What can they expect in the next few days? We'll also decode that. Start with the headlines. I'm Ankit Tyagi. Sharmishta lawyer speaks to NDTV, alleges mistreatment, says denied basic rights in correctional home. 22-year-old influencer arrested for hate speech by Kolkata police. Actor Kamal Hassan approached the Karnataka High Court for relief after film body warned if he did not apologize for his remarks in the Kannada language, his film, The Life of Thug, won't be released in the state. 3 army personnel die and at least 6 others are missing after landslide triggered heavy rainfall hit a military camp in Sikkim. Chennai court sentences the sole convict in the Anna University sex assault case for life imprisonment, 30 years behind bars. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with our top focus at this hour. In fact, on Sunday, Ukraine launched one of its largest drone attack inside Russia, deep inside Russia, almost 4,000 kilometers from the international boundary between Russia and Ukraine. Russia said that several of its aircrafts caught fire after these attacks, but the way this entire operation was conducted is mind-boggling. In fact, 117 drones were used in this operation. That is what Mr. Zelensky said. And these pictures, they explain the story of this strike deep inside Russia in the Murmansk and the region of Russia. Several strategic bombers of Russia caught fire in this attack. This is the biggest long-range attack that's taken place inside Russia. Ukrainian drones strike the warplanes in Russia. And let me very quickly bring you up to speed with the top developments on this story, because it will have far-reaching consequences. The nuclear-capable Tu-95 and Tu-22 strategic bombers have been destroyed. So like I was saying, a few $1,000 hardware, drone hardware from Russia has destroyed billions of dollars of strategic hardware of Russia because of Ukrainian attack. 41 Russian aircrafts have been targeted in the operation, which was named Spider Web by the Ukrainian Secret Service. Development number 2 on this story, ladies and gentlemen, Russia has called this as a terror attack. They will respond at the time of their choosing. Development number 3, related to this, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has hailed Operation Spider Web. In fact, he met the chief of the security services because of the way this operation was conducted. Is just mind-boggling. Development number 4 on this, Ukraine has proposed ceasefire after this operation. Remember, before this, there was an attack which took place on the Ukrainian soil by the Russian military, in which in a military academy in Ukraine, 12 soldiers had died. Development number 5 on Ukraine to continue this offensive. And development number 6, ladies and gentlemen, this is escalation of the war comes at the backdrop of the talks which have begun today in Istanbul, Turkey. What would be the shadow of this attack on that is going to be a very, very important, in fact, factor as well. Now, very quickly, let me tell you, these drones were smuggled deep inside Russia in trucks, and then all these drones were parked at strategic locations near the air bases. 4 to 5 air bases of Russia came under this attack, and this has caused massive problems as far as Russia is concerned. Let me very quickly tell you what is Operation Spiderweb. Ukraine's biggest drone operation against Russia since the war began in 2022. What was the operation? Attack on 5 Russian air bases deep inside Russia. This, in fact, took place almost 4,000 kilometers inside the Russian territory. Drones hit inside 4,000 kilometers. Belaya, along with the Ivanovsko and Olenaya, all these bases were attacked in this operation, which was conducted by the secret forces of Ukraine. 117 drones were deployed by Ukraine. All these drones, ladies and gentlemen, were smuggled inside in trucks inside Russian territory. Drones were concealed within wooden structures. And at a designated time, all these drones were activated, and they went and military aircrafts of Russia, including, as I said, the strategic bombers, the Tu-22 and others, as far as this strike is concerned. 34% of Russian bomber fleet has been damaged, and this has caused, in fact, a massive impact in Russia. Operation was in works for more than a year. The planning was going on for more than a year. This is being seen as one of the most audacious attacks, drone attacks in the recent times, one that will be studied in the history book. Let me very quickly also tell you the significance of this attack. Massive damage to the Russian military hardware. 40 military aircrafts were damaged. Apart from that, also the long-range bombers like the Tu-95MS and Tu-160 have been damaged in this attack. This is deep strike capability. The Ukraine has shown how they can go inside Russian territory and attack. This is a proof of the ability to launch strikes inside Russia, and also this proof is of growing military reach of Ukraine. This will come in handy when both these countries sit and try and figure out a peace or a truce model. The strategic implications also include, Russian ability to conduct long-range bombings, not just in Ukraine, but for any other future operation. Re-evaluation of military strategy deployment will be, in fact, taking place. And this is a massive morale booster for the Ukrainian forces, who were, in fact, facing a lot of attacks as far as the Russian side is concerned. Let's listen into what President Volodymyr Zelensky has said on this.
Щойно була доповідь голови Служби безпеки Малюка. Блискуча операція проведена. На території ворога виключно проти військових цілей, проти саме тієї техніки, яка використовувалась в ударах проти України. Дуже відчутні втрати Росії і абсолютно справедливі, заслужені їхні втрати. Дякую Службі безпеки, особисто генералу Малюку, також всім, хто був задіяний в операції. Готували операцію більш ніж 1,5 роки. Планування, організація, всі деталі були ідеально підготовлені.
Let's dive a little bit deeper in this, and let me go across to Roor, who's been studying this right from the time it happened, trying to understand it threadbare. We're also being joined by Roman Kozyrev, RT correspondent in the Donetsk region. We are also being joined by Andrei Dobozhek, founder and editor-in-chief of Frontline. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me at this moment. Shiv, let me begin with you very quickly. The implications of this is being studied just not in Russia and Ukraine, but across the globe. Possibly one of the most audacious attacks that will go down in the history books. How are you looking at it, and what are the lessons for militaries across the world?
Ankit, thanks very much. I think it's no exaggeration to say that military operations from here on will be divided into pre-Spider's Web and post-Spider's Web, because what this operation has achieved at a minuscule cost and about 1.5 years of planning with